Jason Harris slammed. He couldn't believe what he'd just uncovered. His beautiful wife, Tiffany, led a double life. Tiffany Harris's membership has been confirmed, the email said. Attached was a PDF containing the secret club's membership list, her name glaring back at him, along with a chilling tagline. An exclusive society for elite pleasures and connections. He sank onto the couch, ball rising in his throat. How long had she been sleeping with powerful men for money, status, or both? Earlier that day, Jason had felt uneasy for reasons he couldn't explain. Tiffany had left for one of her so-called charity luncheons, her designer heels clicking sharply against the marble floor as she departed with a kiss that felt colder than usual. He'd ignored his instincts for months, but something about today tipped him over the edge. As he dug deeper into her laptop, left unlocked for once, he discovered folders labeled innocuously with names like events and networking. But inside were encrypted files. Jason had used to work in IT and was no stranger to cracking codes. What he found inside wasn't just shocking, it was damning. Photos, explicit emails, hotel invoices. She had been attending secret gatherings disguised as networking events. The photos showed her draped over men twice her age, some of them household names, business moguls, politicians, and even a judge he had seen on the evening news. One man's hand rested on her bare thigh while she laughed into a champagne glass. Jason wanted to throw the laptop across the room. That evening, Tiffany waltzed in as though nothing was wrong. Her laughter echoed through the foyer as she chatted on her phone, her tones syrupy sweet. "Oh, the gala was divine, darling. I'll see you Thursday." She ended the call and turned to Jason, flashing her signature smile. The one he now realized masked more lies than he could count. "You're home early," she remarked, tossing her purse onto the counter. Jason didn't answer right away. He stared at her, the woman he thought he knew, as she slipped out of her heels and padded toward him in silk stockings. "Busy day?" she asked, reaching up to kiss him on the cheek. He flinched slightly, and her brow furrowed. "What's wrong with you?" He handed her the printout, his jaw tight. "Care to explain this?" Her expression didn't crumble like he expected. Instead, it hardened into something unrecognizable. Tiffany snatched the paper and scanned it, her eyes narrowing before she tossed it onto the coffee table. "You went through my files?" she hissed, her tone more accusatory than guilty. "You lied to me," Jason roared. "Charity luncheons? Networking events? That's what you call sleeping with CEOs and senators." She scoffed, crossing her arms. "Don't be dramatic, Jason. You have no idea what you're talking about." "Don't I?" He grabbed his phone and played a voicemail he'd found during his investigation. A smooth male voice purred through the speakers, saying, "Tiffany, last night was unforgettable. I'm wiring your usual fee. Let me know when you're back in town." Her face turned pale, but she recovered quickly, flipping her hair back with feigned confidence. "So, you went digging. Congratulations, Sherlock. Now what? Going to cry about it?" Jason's hand trembled, but he kept his voice steady. "Why, Tiffany? We had everything. Why would you do this?" "Everything," she spat. "You call a middle-class life in the suburbs everything? Jason, I didn't marry you to live paycheck to paycheck while you prided yourself on being comfortable. I deserve more, and frankly, I found a way to get it." Her cold admission left him speechless. She leaned in, her tone dripping with venom. "You never asked how I afforded the Hermes bag you love showing off to your coworkers. Or how we remodeled the kitchen when your precious budget couldn't cover the countertops I wanted. Open your eyes, Jason. You've been benefiting from this as much as I have." His stomach churned. "How long?" "Does it matter?" she replied, smirking. "You wouldn't have figured it out if you weren't so damn nosy." "Don't you dare twist this on me," Jason growled. "I trusted you." "Oh, please," she sneered. "Grow up. Men like you never get it. You're naive. The world isn't fairy tales and soulmates. It's power and leverage." Jason clenched his fists. She was unapologetic, brazen, and infuriatingly calm. He felt rage bubbling beneath his skin, but also something colder, resolve. "What's that look for?" Tiffany taunted. "Are you going to run crying to your mommy? Face it, Jason, you're weak. That's why I needed more than you could ever offer." Jason didn't answer her taunts. Instead, he turned on his heel and marched out of the house, leaving Tiffany standing there with a satisfied smirk. But she didn't know him as well as she thought. He wasn't the pushover she had written him off to be. Not anymore. Jason drove aimlessly through the city for hours, the weight of betrayal pressing down on his chest. He thought of the years they'd spent together, the nights he stayed late at work to ensure they had a stable future, the vacations he'd carefully planned to make her happy, the moments he'd sacrificed for her ambitions. It had all been a lie, a front for her secret life. But he wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed. If Tiffany wanted a war, he would give her one. The next morning, Tiffany acted as though nothing had happened. She hummed in the kitchen while brewing coffee, her phone buzzing incessantly with texts and notifications. Jason, silent and seething, observed her from across the counter. "I'm meeting the girls for brunch," she said casually, scrolling through her phone. "Don't wait up." Jason's lips curved into a humorless smile. "Take your time, Tiff. I have things to take care of too." Her eyes flicked up briefly, narrowing in suspicion, but she shrugged it off. As she left, Jason grabbed his laptop and got to work. The first step was copying the club's membership list, the names of every high-profile man and woman who had joined Tiffany in her little escapades. Senators, CEOs, even a few celebrities. Each name was tied to dates, locations, and payments. The second step was compiling every incriminating photo, email, and text message he had found on her laptop. He wasn't just aiming to expose Tiffany. He was going to dismantle the entire operation. Jason's hands trembled as he uploaded the documents to an anonymous online platform. He created a timed email with all the evidence and scheduled it to send to every major news outlet in the country. The final email included a chilling tagline: "Secrets of the Elite, the scandal of the century." But Jason wasn't finished. He wanted Tiffany to feel the full weight of her actions. That evening, when she returned home, he greeted her with unsettling calmness. "Hey, babe," she said, slipping off her heels. "Dinner ready?" "I didn't cook," Jason replied flatly. She frowned, noticing the intensity of his stare. "What's your problem now?" Jason pulled out his phone and hit play on another voicemail he had uncovered. It was from a married senator, thanking Tiffany for an incredible evening and promising to take care of her next payment personally. Her face drained of color. "You bastard," she hissed, lunging for his phone. Jason held it out of reach. "Not so fun when the truth's out, huh?" "Delete that. Now," she demanded. Jason leaned closer, his voice low and cold. "You're not in control anymore, Tiffany. I have everything, your clients, your photos, your emails. And tomorrow, the world will too." Her eyes widened in panic. "You wouldn't." "Oh, I would," he snapped. "Because while you were busy whoring yourself out for status, I was busy making sure you'd never recover from this." Tiffany faltered, her bravado crumbling. "Jason, wait. Let's talk about this. You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," he interrupted, his voice sharp as a blade. "You wanted power? Well, now you'll have it, just not the kind you can control." She reached for him, desperation etched across her face. "Please, Jason, if you love me." "Love?" He laughed bitterly. "You killed at the moment you chose money over your vows." What would you do in Jason's position? Do you think he should release the evidence or confront the others involved? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Jason walked past her, grabbing his car keys. "Pack your things, Tiffany. By this time tomorrow, you won't have a life left here." She followed him to the door, screaming threats and pleas, but Jason didn't look back. He drove to a motel on the outskirts of town, his mind racing. Releasing the evidence was a nuclear option, one that would destroy not just Tiffany, but countless others. But he didn't care. They had built their empire on lies and betrayal, and it was time for their reckoning. As he lay in bed, the email timer ticked down. 5 hours. 4. 3. Jason stared at the ceiling, his resolve hardening with each passing minute. He thought of all the nights he had spent doubting himself, wondering if he was enough for Tiffany. No more. This was his moment to take back control. The timer hit 0. The emails were sent. Jason woke up to a storm. Not a literal one, but the kind of chaos that could only come from a carefully planned explosion of truth. His phone buzzed incessantly on the nightstand, notifications lighting up the screen like fireworks. He opened the first message. Breaking news. High-profile secret club exposed. Names of politicians, CEOs, and celebrities revealed. Below was a link to the leaked documents. The emails had worked. Media outlets were ablaze with the story, each competing to uncover more dirt. Social media was a frenzy of speculation and outrage. Jason scrolled through Twitter, watching hashtags like #EliteScandal and #SecretClub trend worldwide. The fallout had begun, and the web of lies Tiffany had spun was unraveling at an astonishing speed. He felt a grim satisfaction, but knew this was only the beginning. Tiffany's name wasn't prominent in the initial headlines, but Jason knew it wouldn't take long before the press put it all together. By the end of the day, her face would be plastered across every screen in America. His phone rang. It was Tiffany. He stared at the screen for a moment before answering. "What do you want?" Jason said, his voice cold. "Jason, what the hell did you do?" she shrieked, her words tumbling over each other. "Do you know what you've done? You've ruined everything." "I ruined everything?" he snapped. "That's rich coming from you, Tiffany. All I did was pull back the curtain on your sick little show." "This isn't just about me," she screamed. "Do you know who you've pissed off? These people don't play games, Jason. They'll come after you." Jason's stomach tightened, but he refused to let her see his fear. "Let them. I'm not the one who built a life on lies and betrayal." "Jason, please," she said, her voice cracking. "You don't understand. You put both of us in danger. You think this is justice, but you're going to regret it. They'll destroy you." "No, Tiffany," he said, his voice like ice. "They'll destroy you." He hung up before she could respond, tossing his phone onto the bed. Her words echoed in his mind, but he pushed the doubt aside. She'd spent years manipulating him. He wasn't about to let her guilt trip him now. By midday, the first wave of consequences hit. Tiffany's face appeared on every major news channel, her name linked to the scandal in bold letters. A clip of her exiting a luxury hotel with a senator surfaced, the timestamp aligning perfectly with one of the leaked invoices. Reporters camped outside their house, cameras flashing as she tried to leave in her Porsche. Jason watched it all unfold from his motel room, a mix of vindication and unease churning in his gut. His phone buzzed again, this time with a message from an unknown number. "You've made a lot of enemies today. Watch your back." He stared at the screen, his pulse quickening. Was Tiffany right? Had he poked a beast too big to handle? Later that evening, there was a knock at the motel door. Jason's heart raced as he approached, grabbing a tire iron from his car for protection. When he opened the door, it wasn't a hitman. It was his neighbor, Greg. "Jason," Greg said, his voice low. "We need to talk." Greg stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "What's going on?" Jason asked, his grip tightening on the tire iron. "I know what you did," Greg said, his expression grim. "And while I can't say I blame you, you've stirred up a hornet's nest. These people don't just go down quietly." Jason swallowed hard. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you need to disappear for a while," Greg replied. "Lay low until this blows over. The men you exposed have resources. Private investigators, hackers, even mercenaries. They'll come for you if they think you're a threat." Jason's blood ran cold. He had been so focused on exposing Tiffany that he hadn't fully considered the ripple effects. Greg handed him a slip of paper. "There's a safe house upstate. My brother runs it for situations like this. Go there. Now." Jason hesitated, but the urgency in Greg's voice convinced him. He packed his belongings, leaving the motel behind as the first hints of dusk painted the sky. Tiffany, meanwhile, was spiraling, with her name splashed across every headline. Her high society friends abandoned her like rats fleeing a sinking ship. Her phone calls went unanswered, her social media accounts were flooded with hate, and even her family refused to take her in. By the time Jason reached the safe house, he received a notification that Tiffany had been arrested. Not for the club itself, but for tax evasion tied to the money she had earned from her illicit activities. Jason leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen. It wasn't the ending he had envisioned, but it was justice nonetheless. Tiffany had always chased power and status, and now she had lost everything. The final message he sent her read simply, "Enjoy the life you deserve." Would you have gone as far as Jason did? Let us know in the comments. The safe house was nestled deep in the woods, surrounded by towering pines and shielded from prying eyes. Jason parked his car in a concealed garage and stepped into the modest cabin, his shoulders heavy with exhaustion. Greg's brother, Ethan, greeted him with a nod. "You'll be safe here," Ethan said, motioning toward a small living area. There's food, water, and a secure line if you need to make any calls. But don't leave unless it's absolutely necessary. Jason barely acknowledged him. His mind raced with everything that had happened. Tiffany's arrest was all over the news, and though she was the center of attention, Jason knew her clients wouldn't take kindly to being dragged into the spotlight. He had struck at the heart of an untouchable elite, and now he was waiting for the inevitable fallout. Meanwhile, Tiffany sat in an interrogation room, her perfect composure shattered. The once flawless makeup ran down her cheeks, and her manicured nails tapped nervously against the table. A pair of agents from the IRS stood across from her, their expressions grim. "Mrs. Harris, let's cut to the chase," one agent said, sliding a folder toward her. "We got evidence of undeclared income totaling millions. Offshore accounts, falsified documents. You've been busy." Tiffany glared at them, her voice trembling. "This is ridiculous. I'm being framed." The second agent raised an eyebrow. "Framed? The financial records don't lie. You've been operating outside the law for years, and your husband's little leak just brought it all to light." At the mention of Jason, Tiffany's eyes narrowed. Her hatred burned hotter than her fear. "Jason," she spat. "That bastard." The agents exchanged a glance. "Maybe you should focus on your own situation, Mrs. Harris. Because right now, the penalties for tax evasion and fraud are the least of your worries." Tiffany's jaw tightened, but she remained silent. She knew they were right. Her life was in shambles, and the men she had built her world around weren't going to protect her. Back at the safe house, Jason tried to distract himself by chopping firewood, but the weight of his actions lingered. He kept replaying Greg's warning in his mind. Had he really put a target on his back? Was exposing Tiffany worth the risk? The next morning, a knock on the door jolted him awake. Grabbing a knife from the kitchen counter, Jason approached cautiously. Ethan peeked through the peephole and nodded. "It's Greg," he said, opening the door. Greg stepped inside, his face pale. "We got a problem." Jason's stomach dropped. "What now?" Greg handed him a newspaper. The front page featured a bold headline. "Anonymous leaker of secret club identified, Jason Harris." Jason's heart pounded as he read the article. Someone had connected the dots, revealing his identity to the world. The article speculated that he had leaked the documents as revenge against his wife, painting him as both a whistleblower and a man scorned. "They know it's you," Greg said, "and they're coming." Jason's pulse raced. "Who's they?" "The club members," Greg replied grimly. "The ones you exposed. Some of them have already been arrested, but others, they've got resources, Jason. They'll stop at nothing to silence you." Jason sank into a chair, his head in his hands. "What do I do?" "You keep running," Greg said. "Lay low until this blows over. Maybe even change your name, disappear completely." Jason shook his head. "No, I'm not running forever. If they want to come after me, let them. I'm not afraid of these people." Greg sighed. "Jason, this isn't about bravery. It's about survival. You've already done the hard part, exposing the truth. Now you need to protect yourself." That night, Jason sat by the fire, staring into the flames. He thought about everything he had lost, his marriage, his sense of security, the life he had built. But he also thought about what he had gained, the satisfaction of knowing he had taken down a corrupt system, even if it meant putting himself in danger. As the fire crackled, his phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from an unknown sender. "You're not safe, but we can help. Reply if interested." Jason's eyes narrowed. Was this a trap, or his best chance at survival? He typed a cautious response and hit send, knowing there was no turning back now. Tiffany, meanwhile, was transported to a federal holding facility, her fate sealed. As the media frenzy continued, her former clients distanced themselves, some denying ever knowing her, others quietly scrambling to cover their tracks. She was alone, abandoned by the very people she had sacrificed everything for. Jason's final message to her haunted her. "Enjoy the life you deserve." For the first time, Tiffany understood the depth of her loss. She had traded love and loyalty for power and status, only to end up with nothing. What do you think Jason should do next? Should he keep running or fight back? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Jason's email reply was succinct. "Who are you, and what do you want?" He set the phone down, his nerves taut. Minutes stretched into hours as he waited for a response. The glow of the fire, the only source of light in the small cabin. Finally, the reply came. We're a group with mutual interests. You exposed them. We want to dismantle them. Meet us tomorrow night, 8 p.m., at the address below. Come alone. Jason's first instinct was to delete the email, but curiosity gnawed at him. Who were these people? Could they really help him? Or was this an elaborate trap set by Tiffany's powerful allies? He didn't know, but he also didn't have many options. Ethan frowned when Jason showed him the email the next morning. This screams setup, Ethan warned. You don't just waltz into something like this without backup. I don't have backup, Jason replied. And if they're legit, this could be my only chance to level the playing field. Ethan sighed. Fine, but at least take this. He handed Jason a small handgun. You've got a better chance with this than without it. The meeting location was an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of a nearby city. Jason parked his car a few blocks away and approached cautiously, the gun tucked into his jacket. The place was dark except for a single light spilling from a cracked window on the second floor. He stepped inside, his footsteps echoing on the concrete floor. Hello, he called, his voice steady despite his racing heart. Over here, a voice replied. Jason turned toward the light and saw a man and a woman standing by a makeshift table. They were both dressed in dark clothes, their faces partially obscured by shadows. You're Jason Harris, the man said, more a statement than a question. Jason nodded, his hand hovering near the gun. Who are you? We're what's left of an oversight group, the woman replied. Think of us as watchdogs for the elite. We've been tracking this club for years, but no one's ever been able to expose them like you did. The man gestured to a stack of papers on the table. Your leak was a gold mine. We've already started building cases against some of the members, but the fallout has made you a target. You're in their crosshairs now, and they don't miss. Jason crossed his arms. What do you want from me? We need your help, the woman said. Your knowledge of your wife's activities, the connections you've uncovered, they're invaluable. With you on our side, we can take them down for good. Jason scoffed. And what's in it for me? Another bullseye on my back. The man leaned forward, his expression serious. We can protect you, relocate you, make sure you disappear if things get too dangerous. But we need your cooperation. Jason hesitated. Trusting these strangers felt like a gamble, but he had little to lose. Fine, he said finally, but if I smell even a hint of betrayal, I'm out. The woman smiled. Welcome aboard, Jason. Back in the federal holding facility, Tiffany's situation grew worse by the day. Her once perfect image was shredded by the media, and her high-profile clients were throwing her under the bus to save themselves. The IRS charges were piling up, and a grand jury was convening to decide if she would face even more severe charges. Her lawyer, a tired man with too many cases and too little time, leaned across the table during their latest meeting. You're running out of options, Mrs. Harris. If you cooperate, you might get a reduced sentence. Cooperate? Tiffany spat. With who? The FBI, he replied. They want names, details, everything about the club and its members. If you give them what they want, it could save you years in prison. Tiffany's hands balled into fists. She had been used by the very people she trusted, and now they expected her to clean up their mess. But what choice did she have? Fine, she said through gritted teeth. I'll talk, but I want a deal in writing. Meanwhile, Jason's new allies wasted no time putting him to work. They provided him with encrypted laptops, burner phones, and access to a network of whistleblowers and activists. Together, they pieced together a massive dossier of evidence, emails, bank transactions, and surveillance footage that painted a damning picture of the club's operations. As the weeks passed, Jason's fear began to transform into determination. He wasn't just fighting for revenge anymore. He was fighting for justice. One night, as he reviewed a particularly incriminating document, his phone buzzed with a news alert. Tiffany had struck a deal with the FBI, agreeing to testify against several club members in exchange for a reduced sentence. Jason's jaw tightened. Her testimony could be the final nail in the coffin, but it also put her back in the crosshairs. He sent a message to his new allies. Tiffany is flipping. Do we act now or wait? The reply came quickly. Wait. Let her do the dirty work. Then we strike. The stage was set for a showdown that would shake the foundations of power. Jason, once a quiet suburban husband, was now at the center of a battle between justice and corruption. Would you trust Jason's allies, or do you think they have their own agenda? Share your thoughts in the comments. Jason's days blurred into nights as he worked tirelessly with the group. Each new piece of evidence painted a more sinister picture of the secret club. What started as high-profile liaisons for money and influence turned out to be the tip of the iceberg. The club's elite members weren't just exploiting their power. They were trafficking information, laundering money, and orchestrating political deals that shaped entire nations. Tiffany's testimony added fuel to the fire. The media labeled her a traitor to her own circle, dubbing her the Queen of Scandal, and every word she uttered in court sent shockwaves through the country. But her cooperation came with consequences. The people she exposed were ruthless, and Jason knew it was only a matter of time before they retaliated. One evening, as Jason sifted through files in the safe house, Greg called. "Jason, you're all over the news again," Greg said, his voice low. "The FBI just leaked that you're working with whistleblowers. They're calling you a hero." Jason leaned back in his chair, his stomach sinking. "That's the last thing I need right now. I didn't ask to be anyone's hero." "You didn't have to," Greg replied. "You're the only one brave or crazy enough to go after these people." Jason sighed. "And now I'm a walking target." "Great." The next morning, Jason received an encrypted message from his new allies. "It's time. We've located the financial hub of the club's operations, a private offshore server farm. We're taking it down. Be ready." Jason's heart raced. A direct strike on the club's financial lifeline was risky, but if successful, it could dismantle the entire operation. He quickly replied, "What do you need me to do?" The response was chillingly simple. "Come with us." Jason met the team that evening in a secluded parking lot. The man and woman he'd met before, introduced now as Daniel and Claire, briefed him on the plan. The server farm was hidden in an industrial complex outside Miami, guarded by private security and state-of-the-art surveillance. "You're the key, Jason," Claire said. "We need you to plant this." She handed him a USB drive. "It's a virus. Once it's in the system, the entire network collapses." Jason's hands shook as he took the drive. "And if I get caught?" Daniel smirked. "Let's just say the people who run this place won't call the cops. They'll handle you themselves." "Comforting," Jason muttered. The operation unfolded under the cover of darkness. Dressed in black and armed with the USB, Jason followed Daniel and Claire into the complex. They moved swiftly, disabling cameras and picking locks with practiced precision. Jason's heart pounded as they approached the main server room, its walls humming with the sound of countless machines. "Stay here," Claire whispered, motioning for Jason to follow Daniel. "We'll cover your exit." Jason nodded and slipped inside with Daniel. The room was a maze of blinking lights and tangled cables. At the center stood the main terminal. "This is it," Daniel said, stepping aside. "Do your thing." Jason hesitated for a moment before inserting the USB drive. A progress bar appeared on the screen, and Jason held his breath as it slowly filled. "Almost there," he whispered, glancing at Daniel. But Daniel wasn't looking at the screen. He was looking at the doorway, where 3 armed guards now stood. "Shit," Jason muttered. The guards barked orders in a language Jason didn't understand, their guns trained on him. Daniel raised his hands, stepping forward. "We don't want trouble," Daniel said calmly. Jason's eyes darted to the screen. The progress bar was at 97%. One of the guards shouted again, and Daniel lunged, tackling him to the ground. Chaos erupted as the other guards fired, bullets ricocheting off the walls. Jason ducked behind the terminal, his heart pounding. The progress bar hit 100%, and the screen went black. "It's done!" Jason shouted, scrambling for the exit. Daniel didn't respond. He was on the floor, blood pooling beneath him. "Jason, move!" Claire's voice rang out from the hallway. Jason bolted, dodging bullets as he ran. Claire covered him, firing a handgun at the guards as they pursued. By the time they reached the getaway car, Jason was gasping for air, his hands stained with Daniel's blood. The aftermath was swift and brutal. News broke the next morning that the club's financial network had been obliterated, their offshore accounts drained, and their secrets exposed. Arrests were made across the globe, and the power structures that had protected the elite crumbled overnight. But Jason's victory came at a cost. Daniel was dead, and Claire had vanished, leaving Jason alone to face the fallout. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This isn't over." Jason stared at the message, a chill running down his spine. He had struck a blow against the elite, but the fight was far from finished. Would you have gone into the server room if you were Jason? Or was the risk too great? Share your thoughts in the comments. Jason's hands trembled as he deleted the ominous text. He paced the safe house, his nerves frayed, every creak of the wooden floorboards setting him on edge. The victory against the secret club felt hollow. He had crippled them financially, but their power, their reach, and their vengeance still loomed. Greg called him later that evening. "Jason," Greg's voice was hushed. "You need to leave. Now." There's chatter that the club is mobilizing its assets. They're furious, and you're their #1 target. Jason gripped the phone tightly. "Where do I even go? They know my name, my face. Hell, probably my shoe size by now." Greg sighed. "I have one more favorite call-in. There's a contact in Mexico. He specializes in making people disappear. But you need to move fast." Jason hesitated. "And just abandon everything? My home, my life." "You don't have a life to go back to, Jason," Greg said bluntly. "This isn't a choice. It's survival." That night, Jason packed what little he had into a backpack and left the safe house under the cover of darkness. Ethan handed him a burner phone and a wad of cash. "Good luck," Ethan said, his voice gruff. "You're going to need it." Jason gave a brief nod and drove off, the weight of the situation settling in his chest. Meanwhile, Tiffany's world continued to crumble. The FBI, satisfied with her testimony, had offered her a plea deal, but it came with a catch: complete isolation and witness protection. Her lawyer outlined the terms during their final meeting. "They'll move you to a safe location under a new identity," he explained. "No contact with anyone from your past. No laxtitis, no exceptions." Tiffany's expression twisted in fury. "You expect me to live in some backwater town, hiding like a rat? I'm Tiffany Haddish." "Not anymore," the lawyer said coldly. "Your name is poison now." She realized, bitterly, that Jason had not only destroyed her reputation, but stripped her of everything she had once valued. Jason reached the border under the cloak of night, following Greg's instructions to a remote crossing point. A man named Mateo waited for him, leaning against a rusted pickup truck. "You Jason?" Mateo asked, his tone casual, but his eyes sharp. Jason nodded, clutching his backpack. "Greg sent me." Mateo motioned for him to get in. "We're heading south. Keep your head down and don't ask questions." The drive through Mexico was long and tense. Jason tried to relax, but every car that passed them made his heart race. Mateo finally stopped at a secluded village nestled in the mountains. "This is it," Mateo said. "You'll stay here for a few weeks while we sort out your new identity." Jason stepped out of the truck, taking in the small adobe houses and the thick jungle that surrounded them. It was a far cry from his suburban life, but it offered one thing he desperately needed: anonymity. Back in the United States, the fallout from the club's exposure intensified. More arrests were made, and the media continued to uncover shocking details about its members. Jason's name resurfaced repeatedly as the whistleblower who had brought it all down. In response, the club's remnants became more desperate. A bounty was placed on Jason's head, and his allies in the Watchdog group went underground. One night, while Jason sat on the porch of his modest hideout, Mateo joined him with a grim expression. "You've stirred up a hornet's nest, amigo," Mateo said, lighting a cigarette. "There are people offering a lot of money to find you." Jason stared into the darkness. "Let them come." Mateo shook his head. "That's not courage, it's suicide. These people don't stop until you're dead." Jason sighed. "So what do I do? Keep running forever?" "No," Mateo said, exhaling a plume of smoke. "You make them think you're already dead." The plan was audacious but simple. Mateo and his network staged an elaborate ruse, planting evidence of Jason's death at a remote location. Photos were leaked to the press, showing a body burned beyond recognition, along with forged documents identifying it as Jason Harris. The news spread quickly, and within days, Jason's name disappeared from headlines. For the first time in months, Jason felt a sliver of relief. He had traded his old life for a chance at survival, but the cost was immeasurable. Weeks later, Jason sat in a small cafe in a bustling Mexican city, blending in with the crowd. He had a new name, new papers, and a chance to start over. But as he sipped his coffee, a familiar figure walked past the window. It was Tiffany. Jason froze, his mind racing. What was she doing here? Was it coincidence, or had she found him? She stepped into the cafe, scanning the room. Their eyes met, and for a moment, neither of them moved. "Jason," she whispered, her voice trembling. He didn't reply. "Jason," she repeated, stepping closer. Her voice trembled, but there was an edge of something else. Fear? Regret? Or perhaps anger? Jason remained seated, his hand tightening around the coffee mug. "What are you doing here, Tiffany?" he asked coldly. She hesitated, glancing around the cafe, before taking the seat across from him. "I could ask you the same thing," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "They said you were dead." "That was the idea," Jason said flatly. "So how did you find me?" "I didn't," she admitted. "I had no idea you were here. I'm in witness protection. Moved to this godforsaken place after everything you did to me." Jason's eyes narrowed. "What I did to you?" His voice rose, drawing the attention of a few nearby patrons. He leaned in, lowering his voice. "You're blaming me for your downfall? After everything you pulled? The lies, the cheating, the club?" Tiffany winced, but didn't back down. "You think you're so righteous, don't you? You think destroying me was justice? Let me tell you something, Jason. You didn't just ruin my life. You ruined your own. Look at you, hiding in some cafe in the middle of nowhere. You're no better off than I am." Jason's jaw clenched, the weight of her words settling over him. He had no intention of letting her see how deeply they cut. "You're wrong, Tiffany," he said after a pause. "I may have lost everything, but at least I can look at myself in the mirror and know I stood for something. Can you say the same?" Her eyes flickered with something. Guilt? Pain? But it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "I didn't come here to argue," she said, her voice softer now. "I came here because I need your help." Jason blinked, stunned. "Help? You've got to be kidding me." Tiffany shook her head, her hands trembling as she clutched the edge of the table. "They're coming after me, Jason. The club. The ones you didn't take down. They think I know where you are. They think I can lead them to you." Jason's blood ran cold. "And can you?" "No," she said quickly. "I swear I didn't know you were here. But it doesn't matter. They're watching me, following me. If they think you're alive..." Jason cut her off, his voice sharp. "If they think I'm alive, it's because you led them here, Tiffany. Whether you meant to or not." Tiffany's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she whispered. "I just wanted to survive." Jason leaned back, his mind racing. He didn't know whether to believe her, but the threat she described was very real. If the remnants of the club were following her, then his carefully constructed facade was already crumbling. Later that night, Jason found himself pacing his small apartment, replaying the encounter in his mind. Tiffany had begged him to help her escape, to use his connections to disappear for good. "Why should I?" he had asked bitterly. "Because if they find you, they'll kill us both," she had replied. Jason had left her sitting in the cafe, unsure whether to walk away or take her plea seriously. Now, as the hours ticked by, he felt the noose tightening around his neck. A knock at the door startled him. Grabbing the gun Mateo had given him, he approached cautiously. "It's me," came Tiffany's voice from the other side. Jason opened the door just enough to see her face. She looked frantic. "They're here," she said breathlessly. "I saw them watching me outside the cafe. They know you're alive." Jason's stomach dropped. "How many?" "2, maybe 3, she said. "We have to go." Jason hesitated, every instinct screaming at him to slam the door in her face and disappear once more. But deep down, he knew she was right. If they had found her, it was only a matter of time before they came for him too. The two of them fled into the night, sticking to back roads and avoiding main highways. Jason's knowledge of the area gave them an advantage, but he knew it wouldn't last. "What's the plan?" Tiffany asked as they drove. "I don't have one yet," Jason admitted. "But if they're coming after me, they won't stop until they're dealt with." Tiffany shivered. "You mean?" Jason nodded grimly. "This ends here." They stopped at a remote gas station, where Jason made a call to Mateo. "You were right," Jason said. They found me. Mateo cursed under his breath. Stay put. I'll send backup. Jason hung up, his resolve hardening. He wasn't running anymore. As they waited for Mateo's team, Jason and Tiffany prepared for the confrontation. He couldn't shake the irony of the situation, working with the very woman who had betrayed him to fight the enemies she had brought into their lives. But as the headlights of an unfamiliar car appeared in the distance, Jason pushed all doubts aside. The headlights grew brighter as the car approached the gas station, its tires crunching on the gravel. Jason watched from the shadows, his grip tightening on the handgun Mateo had given him. Beside him, Tiffany crouched low, her breathing shallow. Stay here, Jason whispered. If this goes south, run. Tiffany grabbed his arm. You can't take them alone. I don't have a choice, Jason muttered, prying her hand off. The car stopped, and two men stepped out, their silhouettes barely visible in the dim light of the station's lone bulb. Jason recognized the unmistakable confidence in their movements. Trained professionals. Jason Harris, one of them called out, his voice carrying over the cool night air. We know you're here. Come out, and maybe we can make this quick. Jason's stomach churned, but he kept his breathing steady. He scanned the area for advantages, cover, escape routes, anything. The second man opened the car trunk and pulled out a shotgun, racking it with a chilling click. You've caused a lot of problems for the wrong people, he said. But lucky for you, our employers are willing to forgive. Just give us what we need. Jason knew better. They weren't here for forgiveness. They were here to clean up loose ends. He stepped out from behind the station's rusted dumpster, his gun aimed squarely at the man with the shotgun. I don't think we'll be negotiating tonight, Jason said, his voice cold. Both men turned toward him, surprised but not rattled. The one without the shotgun raised his hands mockingly. Relax, Harris. We're just here to talk. Jason smirked. I don't think your friend brought that to talk. The shotgun wielder leveled his weapon at Jason. Last chance. Drop the gun and come with us, or we'll take you in pieces. Before Jason could respond, a loud crack shattered the tension. The man with the shotgun staggered, a red blossom spreading across his chest. Jason spun toward the source of the shot. Mateo stood at the edge of the station's lot, a rifle in his hands. Looks like you could use some backup, Mateo said, striding forward. The second man reacted quickly, pulling a pistol from his waistband. Jason fired first, hitting him in the shoulder and sending him sprawling to the ground. The silence that followed was deafening. Jason's hands shook as he lowered his weapon. You good? Mateo asked, stepping over the injured man to kick the pistol away. Jason nodded, his heart pounding. For now. With the immediate threat neutralized, Jason and Mateo dragged the injured man inside the gas station storage room, tying him to a chair. Tiffany followed, her face pale but determined. Start talking, Mateo growled, pressing the barrel of his rifle against the man's temple. The man winced, blood dripping from his shoulder. Go to hell. Mateo laughed darkly. Wrong answer. He jabbed the rifle harder. Who sent you? How many more are coming? The man sneered, blood staining his teeth. You think killing me will solve your problems? You're already dead, Harris. The club doesn't forgive, and it doesn't forget. Jason stepped closer, his voice ice cold. I don't care about forgiveness. I want answers. The man stared at him for a long moment, then chuckled. You think you've won? You don't even know who you're up against. Mateo raised the rifle, but Jason stopped him. He's stalling. Let's move. What about him? Mateo asked, nodding toward the tied-up man. Jason's gaze hardened. He'll have to fend for himself. The man's cocky grin faltered as Jason and Mateo left the room, locking the door behind them. Jason, Mateo, and Tiffany drove deep into the mountains, stopping at a safe house Mateo had prepared. It was small and heavily fortified, with enough supplies to last weeks. Inside, Tiffany slumped onto a worn couch, her hands trembling. This isn't going to stop, is it? Jason shook his head. Not until we finish it. Mateo leaned against the wall, his rifle slung over his shoulder. Then we take the fight to them. No more running, no more hiding. We hit them where it hurts. Jason frowned. And where exactly is that? Mateo smirked, pulling out a tablet. While you were busy, I did some digging. There's a meeting scheduled next week. High-level members of the club. If we crash it, we can take out their leadership in one move. Tiffany's eyes widened. You're talking about an assassination. Mateo shrugged. Call it what you want. It's them or us. Jason's mind raced. The idea was reckless, dangerous, and likely to fail. But it was also their best shot at ending the nightmare for good. I'm in, Jason said finally. Tiffany stared at him, her expression torn. You'll get yourself killed. Jason met her gaze, his voice steady. Then at least I'll die fighting. The next week passed in a blur of preparation. Mateo gathered weapons and intel, while Jason trained relentlessly, determined to be ready for whatever came next. Tiffany, despite her protests, stayed close, offering what little help she could. On the eve of the operation, Jason stood outside, staring at the stars. Tiffany joined him, her expression soft. I know I've done horrible things, she said quietly. But I never wanted this. I never wanted to destroy you. Jason didn't respond immediately. Finally, he said, It doesn't matter what you wanted, Tiffany. This is where we are now. She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. Just don't die tomorrow. Jason managed a small, bitter smile. No promises. The next day, as they approached the meeting site, Jason's resolve hardened. The time for running was over. It was time to end the fight for good. Jason, Mateo, and Tiffany arrived near the meeting site just after dusk. It was a sprawling private estate on the outskirts of a coastal city, surrounded by high walls and patrolled by armed guards. The club's elite were inside, gathered for a clandestine strategy session to rebuild their fractured empire. Security's tight, Mateo murmured, scanning the perimeter through binoculars. 2 guards at every entrance. Cameras on every corner. If we're getting in, it has to be clean and fast. Jason crouched beside him, his jaw set. What's the plan? Mateo handed him a small earpiece and motioned toward the back of the estate. There's a service gate near the dock. Less guarded but still under surveillance. We breach there and make our way inside. Once we're in, we plant the charges, take out their servers, and get the hell out. Jason frowned. And the leadership? Mateo's expression darkened. Collateral damage. Tiffany, sitting behind them, shifted uncomfortably. You're talking about killing them all? Mateo didn't look at her. You think they'll stop if we don't? These people don't negotiate. They don't forgive. They'll keep coming until we're all in the ground. Jason's gaze met hers. He's right. We tried playing it safe. Look where it got us. Tiffany hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Fine. But if this goes wrong, it won't, Jason said, though he wasn't sure if he believed it. They moved quickly under the cover of darkness, hugging the tree line until they reached the service gate. Mateo disabled the camera with a well-placed shot from a suppressed pistol, and Jason pried the gate open with a crowbar. Inside, the estate was eerily quiet, the muffled sound of waves crashing against the dock in the distance. They slipped through the manicured gardens, avoiding the main paths, until they reached the rear of the mansion. Server rooms on the second floor, Mateo whispered. We split up. Jason, you're with me. Tiffany, stay here and watch our exit route. Tiffany opened her mouth to protest, but stopped when Jason gave her a stern look. Stay here, he repeated. If something goes wrong, you need to be ready to move. She nodded reluctantly, retreating into the shadows. Inside, the mansion was opulent and cold, its grandeur marred by the knowledge of what it represented. Jason and Mateo moved silently, taking out a lone guard near the stairwell before ascending to the second floor. The server room was exactly where Mateo's intel had said it would be, a secure, windowless space lined with racks of humming machines. Mateo set to work planting explosives while Jason kept watch. How much time? Jason asked, his voice low. 5 minutes, Mateo replied. Jason nodded, his grip tightening on his weapon. Downstairs, the meeting was in full swing. Through a partially open door, Jason could see the club's leadership gather around a long table, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of a chandelier. He recognized some of them from the leaked documents, politicians, CEOs, media moguls. These were the people who had orchestrated his destruction, who had hunted him relentlessly. His finger hovered over the trigger. It would be so easy to end it here. One burst of gunfire, and the world would be rid of them. But then what? He took a step back, his breathing steady. There was a better way to destroy them, one that didn't require becoming like them. The explosives were set, and Mateo handed Jason the detonator as they made their way back to the exit. "Once we're clear, hit the button," Mateo said. They regrouped with Tiffany at the service gate. She looked pale but determined. "Is it done?" she asked. Jason held up the detonator. "Almost." They slipped back through the gate and into the woods, putting as much distance between themselves and the estate as possible. When they reached a safe vantage point, Jason turned back. "Do it," Mateo said. Jason pressed the button. The explosion ripped through the mansion, a fireball lighting up the night sky. Windows shattered, and the sound of collapsing walls echoed through the air. Back in the woods, Jason, Mateo, and Tiffany watched the flames consume the estate. For a moment, there was only silence. "It's over," Jason said finally, though he didn't feel the relief he had expected. Mateo nodded. "For now." Tiffany wrapped her arms around herself, her gaze fixed on the burning ruins. "What happens now?" Jason turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Now we disappear?" This is end of the story. Do not forget to subscribe. See you in another videos.